download the recording for yesterday. And then again today. I have Alexander has been putting them on YouTube as well. So I will get them up on YouTube because that may be an easier way for you guys to watch them when you miss class or class isn't coming through clearly for you. Does anybody have any questions on what has happened so far in the story or about the quiz questions yesterday? Anybody have questions? No, everybody's good. Everybody understands what's happening. Okay. So I think we're on chapter 33, right? All right. And remember how in this section it's going between Layla and Miriam, right? So the circumstances are that we know that Layla is pregnant, right? And for the first time at the end of chapter 32, she could feel the baby kick. Miriam is not happy to have her in the house. And Layla feels badly for that. She does feel guilty for marrying Rashid as far as Miriam is concerned, but she did it for her baby, right? And the baby, we know, although Rashid doesn't, we know it is Tariq's baby, right? Rashid does not know that, but we know that. Okay, so chapter 33 is Miriam. And notice that we're starting to get some dates too, and maybe what we should be doing too at some point is going back and kind of looking at our settings and all that because we jump around a little bit. All right, so early one morning, the next spring of 1993, right? A pregnancy lasts for 9 months. Miriam stood by the living room window and watched Rashid escort the girl out of the house. The girl was tottering forward, bent at the waist, one arm draped protectively across the taut drum of her belly, the shape of which was visible through her burqa. Rashid, anxious and overly attentive, was holding her elbow, directing her across the yard like a traffic policeman. He made a "wait here" gesture, rushed to the front gate, then motioned for the girl to come forward, one foot propping the gate open. When she reached him, he took her by the hand, helped her through the gate. Miriam could almost hear him say, "Watch your step now, my flower, my ghoul." They came back early the next morning. Miriam saw Rashid enter the yard first. He let the gate go prematurely and it almost hit the girl on the face. He crossed the yard in a few quick steps. Miriam detected a shadow on his face, darkness underlying the coppery light of dusk. In the house, he took off his coat, threw it on the couch. Brushing past Miriam, he said in a brusque voice, "I'm hungry. Get supper ready." Why do you think that is? Why do you think he is not being as nice to Layla now?
The baby is a girl?
Yeah, the baby's a girl. Thank you, Holly. Yes, not fair. I like girls. Miriam, I'm sorry, the front door to the house opened. In the hallway, Miriam saw the girl, a swaddled bundle in the hook of her left arm. She had one foot outside, the other inside against the door to prevent it from springing shut. She was stooped over and was grunting, trying to reach for the paper bag of belongings that she had put down in order to open the door. Her face was grimacing with effort. She looked up and saw Miriam. Miriam turned around and went to the kitchen to warm Rashid's meal. "It's like someone is ramming a screwdriver into my ear," Rashid said, rubbing his eyes. He was standing in Miriam's door, puffy-eyed, wearing only a turban tied with a floppy knot. His white hair was straggly, pointing every which way. "This crying, I can't stand it." Downstairs, the girl was walking the baby across the floor, trying to sing to her. "I haven't had a decent night's sleep in 2 months," Rashid said, "and the room smells like a sewer. There's shit claws lying all over the place. I stepped on one just the other night." Miriam smirked inwardly with perverse pleasure. Seeing Rashid miserable kind of makes her happy. "Take her outside," Rashid yelled over his shoulder. "Can't you take her outside?" The singing was suspended briefly. "She'll catch pneumonia. It's summertime." "What?" Rashid clenched his teeth and raised his voice. "I said it's warm out. I'm not taking her outside." The singing resumed. Sometimes, I swear, sometimes I want to put that thing in a box and let her float down Cobble River, like baby Moses. Miriam never heard him call his daughter by the name the girl had given her, Aziza, the cherished one. It was always the baby, or when he was really exasperated, that thing. Some nights, Miriam overheard them arguing. She tiptoed to their door, listened to him complain about the baby, always the baby, the insistent crying, the smells, the toys that made him trip, the way the baby had hijacked Layla's attentions from him, and constant demands to be fed, burped, changed, walked, held. The girl, in turn, scolded him for smoking in the room, for not letting the baby sleep with them. There were other arguments waged in voices pitched low. The doctor said 6 weeks. Not yet, Rashid. No, let go. Come on, don't do that. It's been 2 months. Shh, there, you woke up the baby. Then more sharply. Koshodi, happy now? Miriam would sneak back to her room. Can't you help? Rashid said now. There must be something you can do. What do I know about babies? Miriam said. Rashid, can you bring the bottle? It's sitting on the almari. She won't feed. I want to try the bottle again. The baby's screeching rose and fell like a cleaver on meat. Rashid closed his eyes. That thing is a warlord. Hekmatyar, I'm telling you. Layla's given birth to Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. Miriam watched as the girl's days became consumed with cycles of feeding, rocking, bouncing, walking. And when the baby napped, there were soiled diapers to scrub and leave to soak in a pail of disinfectant that the girl had insisted Rashid buy for her. There were fingernails to trim with sandpaper, coveralls and pajamas to wash and hang dry. These clothes, like other things about the baby, became a point of contention. What's the matter with them? Rashid said. They're boys' clothes for a bacha. You said you think she knows the difference? I paid good money for those clothes. And another thing, I don't care for that tone. Consider that a warning. Every week, without fail, the girl heated a black metal brazier over a flame, tossed a pitch of wild rue seeds in it, and wafted the espandi smoke in her baby's direction to ward off evil. Miriam found it exhausting to watch the girl's lolloping enthusiasm, and had to admit, if only privately, to a degree of admiration. She marveled at how the girl's eyes shone with worship, even in the mornings when her face drooped and her complexion was waxy from the night's worth of walking the baby. The girl had fits of laughter when the baby passed gas. The tiniest changes in the baby enchanted her, and everything it did was declared spectacular. Look, she's reaching for the rattle. How clever she is. I'll call the newspapers, said Rashid. Every night there were demonstrations. When the girl insisted he witness something, Rashid tipped his chin upward and cast an impatient sidelong glance down the blue-veined hook of his nose. Watch how she laughs when I snap my fingers. There, see, did you see? Rashid would grunt and go back to his plate. Miriam remembered how the girl's mere presence used to overwhelm him. Everything she said used to please him, intrigue him, make him look up from his place and nod with approval. The strange thing was, the girl's fall from grace ought to have pleased Miriam, brought her a sense of vindication, but it didn't. It didn't. To her own surprise, Miriam found herself pitying the girl. You guys know what it means to fall from grace? Okay, so it's basically a term that would have been used about angels. So when someone thinks you're perfect, sometimes we call it falling off the pedestal, right? You're held up on a pedestal and then suddenly you seem very human and you just fall and the person no longer admires you the way they used to, right? So Rashid used to have the Mercedes-Benz up here, right? And then because she gave birth to a girl, right, and not the son he wanted, now suddenly she's not so spectacular, right? And so Miriam sang, because she was so offended by the girl's presence, that she should have been happy about that, but in fact she felt badly for the girl, right? So her emotions are changing towards Layla a little bit. It was also over dinner that the girl let loose a steady stream of worries. Topping the list was pneumonia, which was suspected with every minor cough. Then there was dysentery, the specter of which was raised with every loose stool. Every rash was either chickenpox or measles. You should not get so attached, Rashid said one night. What do you mean? I was listening to the radio the other night, Voice of America. I heard an interesting statistic. They said that in Afghanistan, 1 out of 4 children will die before the age of 5. That's what they said. Now what? What are you doing? Come back here. Get back here this instant. He gave Miriam a bewildered look. What's the matter with her? That night, Miriam, so why do you think she walked away? Layla clearly left. Does she want to hear that? Not really, right? She's already worried. I'm like, oh, don't get so attached, you know? There was a time everywhere where babies died pretty consistently. He gave Miriam a bewildered look. What's the matter with her? That night, Miriam was lying in bed when the bickering started again. This is an important part, by the way. It was a hot, dry summer night, typical of the month of Sataran in Kabul. Miriam had opened her window, then shut it when no breeze came through to temper the heat, only mosquitoes. She could feel the heat rising from the ground outside, through the wheat brown splintered planks of the outhouse in the yard, up through the walls and into her room. Usually the bickering ran its course after a few minutes, but half an hour passed, and not only was it still going on, it was escalating. Miriam could hear Rashid shouting now. The girl's voice underneath his was tentative and shrill. Soon the baby was wailing. Then Miriam heard their door open violently. In the morning, she would find the doorknob's circular impression on the hallway wall. She was sitting up in bed with her own door slammed open, and Rashid came through. Okay, so one of my questions on the quiz was, who gets punished if Layla doesn't do what Rashid wants? Miriam, right? Okay, so Miriam is the one who gets punished. He was wearing white underpants and a matching undershirt, stained yellow with in the underarms with sweat. On his feet, he wore flip-flops. He held a belt in his hand, the brown leather one he'd bought for his nikah with the girl, and was wrapping the perforated end around his fist. It's your doing. I know it is, he snarled, advancing on her. Miriam slid out of her bed and began backpedaling. Her arms instinctively crossed over her chest, where he often struck first. What are you talking about? She stammered. You're her denying me. You're teaching her to. Over the years, Miriam had learned to harden herself against his scorn and reproach, his ridiculing and reprimanding. But this fear she had no control over. All these years, and she still shivered with fright when he was like this, sneering, tightening the belt around his fist, the creaking of the letter, the glint in his bloodshot eyes. It was the fear of the goat released in the tiger's cage when the tiger first looks up from its paws, begins to growl. Now the girl was in the room, her eyes wide, her face contorted. I should have known that you'd corrupt her. Rashid spat at Miriam. He swung the belt, testing it against his own thigh. The buckle jingled loudly. Stop it, boss, the girl said. Rashid, you can't do this. Go back to the room. Miriam backpedaled again. No, don't do this. Now. Rashid raised the belt again, and this time came at Miriam. Then an astonishing thing happened. The girl lunged at him. She grabbed his arm with both hands and tried to drag him down, but she could no more do that than dangle from it. She did succeed in slowing Rashid's progress toward Miriam. Let go, Rashid cried. You win. Don't do this. Please, Rashid, no beating. Please don't do this. They struggled like this, the girl hanging on, pleading, Rashid trying to shake her off, keeping his eyes on Miriam, who was too stunned to do anything. In the end, Miriam knew that there would be no beating, not that night. He'd made his point. He stayed that way a few moments longer, arm raised, chest heaving, a fine sheen of sweat filming his brow. Slowly, Rashid lowered his arm. The girl's feet touched the ground, and still she wouldn't let go, as if she didn't trust him. He had to yank his arm free of her grip. I'm on to you, he said, slinging the belt over his shoulder. I'm on to you both. I won't be made an ahmak, a fool in my own house. He threw Miriam one last murderous stare and gave the girl a shove in the back on the way out. When she heard their door close, Miriam climbed back into bed, buried her head beneath the pillow, and waited for the shaking to stop. 3 times that night, Miriam was awakened from sleep. The first time, it was the rumble of rockets in the west, coming from the direction of Kartashar. The second time, it was the baby crying downstairs, the girls shushing, the clatter of spoon against milk bottle. Finally, it was thirst that pulled her out of bed. Downstairs, the living room was dark, save for a bar of moonlight spilling from the window. Miriam could hear the buzzing of a fly somewhere, could make out the outline of the cast iron stove in the corner, its pipe jutting up, then making a sharp angle just below the ceiling. On her way to the kitchen, Miriam nearly tripped over something. There was a shape at her feet. When her eyes adjusted, she made out the girl and her baby lying on the floor on top of a quilt. The girl was sleeping on her side, snoring. The baby was awake. Miriam lit the kerosene lamp on the table and hunkered down. In the light, and she had her first real close-up look at the baby, the tuft of dark hair, the thick-lashed hazel eyes, the pink cheeks, the lips the color of ripe pomegranate. Miriam had the impression that the baby, too, was examining her. She was lying on her back, her head tilted sideways, looking at Miriam intently, with a mixture of amusement, confusion, and suspicion. Miriam wondered if her face might frighten her, but then the baby squealed happily, and Miriam knew that a favorable judgment had been passed on her behalf. Shh, Miriam whispered, you'll wake up your mother, half deaf as she is. The baby's hand balled into a fist. It rose, fell, found a spastic path to her mouth. Around a mouthful of her own hands, the baby gave Miriam a grin, little bubbles of spittle shining on her lips. Look at you, what a sorry sight you are, dressed like a damn boy, and all bundled up in this heat. No wonder you're still awake. Miriam pulled the blanket off the baby, was horrified to find a second one beneath, clucked her tongue, and pulled that one off too. The baby giggled with relief. She flapped her arms like a bird. Better, nay? As Miriam was pulling back, the baby grabbed her pinky. Tiny fingers curled themselves tightly around it. They felt warm and soft, moist with drool. Gunna, the baby said. All right, boss, let go. The baby hung on, kicked her legs again. Miriam pulled her finger free. The baby smiled and made a series of gurgling sounds. The knuckles went back to the mouth. What are you so happy about, huh? What are you smiling at? You're not so clever as your mother says. You have a brute for a father and a fool for a mother. You wouldn't smile so much if you knew. No, you wouldn't. Go to sleep now. Go on. Miriam rose to her feet and walked a few steps before the baby started saying sounds, and Miriam signaled the onset of a hearty cry. She retraced her steps. What is it? What do you want from me? The baby grinned toothlessly. Miriam sighed. She sat down and let her finger be grabbed, looked on as the baby squeaked, as she flecked her plump legs at the hips and kicked air. Miriam sat there watching until the baby stopped moving and began snoring softly. Outside, mockingbirds were singing blithely, and once in a while, when the songsters took flight, Miriam could see their wings catching the phosphorescent blue of moonlight beaming through the clouds. And though her throat was parched with thirst and her feet burned with pins and needles, it was a long time before Miriam gently freed her finger from the baby's grip and got up. Ooh. All right. So what is that about? What is Miriam kind of experiencing with that baby for the first time?
She's experiencing like a maternal moment she didn't get to have.
Yeah,
So
right? And that unconditional love that a baby gives, right? So there was Miriam expecting to have her face frighten this baby, and the baby's just all gurgly and happy, right? Yeah. So that is a softening. And, with Layla, right? Why was Miriam so surprised when Layla stopped Rashid from beating her? Yes. Right. Yeah. Well, first of all, she doesn't have to do it, right? She could have him take it out on Miriam, and yeah. And how often has somebody been kind to Miriam? Looked out for Miriam? Kind of almost never, right? Yeah. So it was like for the first time somebody did something that was purely for Miriam, right? And now she has this little bond with this baby. All right. 34. Talking about a dry throat of Miriam is making me thirsty. Anybody have any questions about that chapter? Everybody following along okay with me?
Teacher, I have a question.
Yes, Fariba.
Teacher, can I ask a question? Okay,
Yes, of
teacher,
course.
it was a line that I want to read for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, teacher, it was a line that I want to read for you. Dearest, you will wake up your mother, half deaf as she is. It means that Layla was deaf.
Yes. Remember when the explosion happened when her parents died? She couldn't hear in one ear. Remember, she said, I can't. So I don't think she's ever gotten the hearing back on one ear. That makes her half deaf.
Okay, teacher.
Yeah, it's from the explosion.
Miss,
Yes.
what is the meaning of pins and needles?
Oh, so pins and needles means nervous. If you're on pins and needles, it's like you're nervous about something that's going to happen. Great question.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't hesitate to ask me things, you guys, because sometimes it occurs to me to explain something and sometimes it doesn't because I'm so used to idiom. That would be called an idiom, which is just a saying, you know, that I've been hearing for 50 years that you would be new for you. So yeah, don't hesitate to ask things like that because I may take something for granted that you don't know. And I try to anticipate, but I can't always. All right, 34. Layla. Of all earthly pleasures, Layla's favorite was lying next to Aziza. Jeffrey, with me? With me? Her baby's face so close that she could watch her big pupils dilate and shrink. Layla loved running her finger over Aziza's pleasing, soft skin, over the dimpled knuckles, the folds of fat at her elbows. Sometimes she lay Aziza down on her chest and whispered into the soft crown of her head things about Tariq, the father who would always be a stranger to Aziza, whose face Aziza would never know. Layla told her of his aptitude for solving riddles, his trickery and mischief, his easy laugh. He had the prettiest lashes, just like yours, a good chin, a fine nose, and a round forehead. Oh, your father was handsome, Aziza. He was perfect, perfect like you are. But she was careful never to mention him by name. Sometimes she caught Rashid looking at Aziza in a most peculiar way. The other night, sitting on the bedroom floor where he was shaving a corn from his foot, he said quite casually, "So what was it like between you two?" Layla had given him a puzzled look, as though she didn't understand. "Lately in Manjun, you and the young Lenga, the cripple, what was it you had, he and you?" "He was my friend," she said, careful that her voice not shift too much in key. She busied herself making a bottle. "You know that." "I don't know what I know." Rashid deposited the shavings on the windowsill and dropped onto the bed. The springs protested with a loud creak. He splayed his legs, picked at his crotch. "And as friends, did the two of you ever do anything out of order?" "Out of order?" Rashid smiled lightheartedly, but Layla could feel his gaze, cold and watchful. "Let me see now. Well, did he ever give you a kiss? Maybe put his hand where it didn't belong?" Layla winced, she hoped, an indignant air. She could feel her heart drumming in her throat. "He was like a brother to me." "So he was a friend or a brother?" "Both. Which was it?" "He was like both. But brothers and sisters are creatures of curiosity, yes. Sometimes a brother lets his sister see his pecker and a sister will—" "You sicken me," Layla said. "So there was nothing." "I don't want to talk about this anymore." Rashid tilted his head, pursed his lips, nodded. "People gossiped, you know. I remember. They said all sorts of things about you two. But you're saying there was nothing." She willed herself to glare at him. He held her eyes for an excruciatingly long time in an unblinking way that made her knuckles go pale around the milk bottle, and it took all that Layla could muster not to falter. She shuddered at what he would do if he found out that she had been stealing from him. Every week. Ooh, a new development here, people. Every week since Aziza's birth, she pried his wallet open when he was asleep, or in the outhouse and took a single bill. Some weeks, if the wallet was light, she took only a 5 Afghani bill, or nothing at all, for fear that he would notice. When the wallet was plumped, she helped herself to a 10 or a 20, once even risking 2 20s. She hid the money in a pouch she'd sewn in the lining of her checkered winter coat. She wondered what he would do if he knew that she was planning to run away next summer at the latest. Layla hoped to have 1,000 Afghanis or more stowed away, half of which would go to the bus fare from Kabul to Peshawar. She would pawn her wedding ring when the time drew close, as well as the other jewelry that Rashid had given her the year before when she was still the Malika of this palace. Anyway, he said at last, fingers drumming his belly, I can't be blamed. I am a husband. There are the things a husband wonders. But he's lucky he died the way he did, because if he was here now, if I got my hands on him, he sucked through his teeth and shook his head. What happened to not speaking ill of the dead? I guess some people can't be dead enough, he said. Whew. Rashid, good guy. Not so much. 2 days later, Layla woke up in the morning and found a stack of baby clothes. Okay, pay attention. A stack of baby clothes neatly folded outside her bedroom door. There was a twirl dress with little pink fishes sewn around the bodice, a blue floral wool dress with matching socks and mittens, yellow pajamas with carrot-colored polka dots, and green cotton pants with a dotted ruffle on the cuff. There is a rumor, Rashid said over dinner that night, smacking his lips, taking no notice of Aziza or the pajamas Layla had put on her, that Datsum is going to change sides and join Hekmatyar. Masood will have his hands full then, fighting these two. And he mustn't forget, and we mustn't forget the Hazaras. He took a pinch of the pickled eggplant Miriam had made that summer. Let's hope it's just that, a rumor, because if that happens, this war, he waved one greasy hand, will seem like a Friday picnic at Pagman. Later, he mounted her and relieved himself with wordless haste, fully dressed save for his tumban, but pulled down to the ankles. When the frantic rocking was over, he rolled off her and was asleep in minutes. Layla slipped out of the bedroom and found Miriam in the kitchen squatting, cleaning a pair of trout. A pot of rice was already soaking beside her. The kitchen smelled like cumin and smoke, browned onions, and fish. Layla sat in a corner and draped her knees with the hem of her dress. Thank you, she said. Miriam took no notice of her. She finished cutting up the first trout and picked up the second. With a serrated knife, she clipped the fins, then turned the fish over, its underbelly facing her, and sliced it expertly from the tail to the gills. Layla watched her put her thumb into its mouth, just over the lower jaw, push it in, and in one downward stroke, remove the gills and the entrails. Clothes are lovely. I had no use for them, Miriam muttered. She dropped the fish on the newspaper, smudged with slimy gray juice, and sliced off its head. It was either your daughter or the moths. Where did you learn to clean the fish like that? When I was a little girl, I lived by a stream. I used to catch my own fish. I've never fished. Not much to it. It's mostly waiting. Layla watched her cut the gutted trout into thirds. Did you sew the clothes yourself? Miriam nodded. When? Miriam rinsed sections of fish in a bowl of water. When I was pregnant the first time. Or maybe the second time. 18, 19 years ago. Long time, anyhow. Like I said, I never had any use for them. You're a really good Kayat. Maybe you can teach me. Miriam placed the rinsed chunks of trout into a clean bowl, drops of water dripping from her fingertips. She raised her head and looked at Layla, looked at her as if for the first time. The other night, when nobody's ever stood up for me before, she said. Layla examined Miriam's drooping cheeks, the eyelids that sagged in tired folds, the deep lines that framed her mouth. She saw these things as though she too were looking at someone for the first time. And for the first time, it was not an adversary's face. You guys know what an adversary is? It's kind of like an enemy, somebody that you're going up against. It was not an adversary's face Layla saw, but the face of grievances unspoken, burdens gone unprotested, a destiny submitted to and endured. If she stayed, would this be her own face, Layla wondered, 20 years from now? What did Nana, Miriam's mother, say the role of a woman in life was? What? To bear everything, to endure, right? And that is exactly what is happening to Miriam, right? She's enduring, and that's something Layla's noticing. And does Layla want that for herself? No. I couldn't let him, Layla said. I wasn't raised in a household where people did things like that. This is your household now. You ought to get used to it. Not to that. I won't. He'll turn on you too, you know, Miriam said, wiping her hands dry with a rag. Soon enough. And you gave him a daughter, so you see, your sin is even less forgivable than mine. And what was Miriam's sin for Rashid?
Not
Yeah,
being not being able to have a baby.
Yeah, not being able to have any children. But having a girl, apparently, is worse. Let's see. Layla rose to her feet. I know it's chilly outside, but what do you say we sinners have a cup of chai in the yard? Miriam looked surprised. I can't. I still have to cut and wash the beans. I'll help you do it in the morning. And I have to clean up here. We'll do it together. If I'm not mistaken, there's some halwa left over, awfully good with chai. Miriam put the rag on the counter. Layla sensed anxiety in the way she tugged at her sleeves, adjusted her hijab, pushed back a curl of hair. The Chinese say it's better to be deprived of food for 3 days than tea for 1. Is that true? Have you ever heard that saying? Better to be deprived of food, that means not be able to eat, than not be able to drink tea. You'd rather have tea than food? Miriam gave a half smile. It's a good saying. It is, but I can't stay long. 1 cup. They sat on folding chairs outside and ate halwa with their fingers from a common bowl. They had a 2nd cup, and when Layla asked her if she wanted a 3rd, Miriam said she did. As gunfire cracked in the hills, they watched the clouds slide over the moon and the last of the season's fireflies charting bright yellow arcs in the dark. And when Aziza woke up crying and Rashid yelled for Layla to come up and shut her up, a look passed between Layla and Miriam, an unguarded, knowing look. And in this fleeting, worldless exchange with Miriam, Layla knew that they were not enemies any longer. All right, so that's good, right? They're going to be friends. You guys know what fireflies are? Those little bugs that fly around and their tails light up. It's usually in the summertime, at least here. You don't see as many here. Tons of them in Virginia. Yes, they come out at night. One of the things that I saw in New Zealand that was really fascinating. Tell me if any of you have seen these before, but we went into a cave that had a stream going down the bottom of it, and they had what they call glowworms on the ceiling. And so it's, of course, in a cave, it's pitch black, you know, once you get away from the entry. And they put us in a boat, and then they shut off all flashlights and stuff. And then they took us down, and it looks like stars all along the ceiling. And what they are the larvae of this particular fly, and they glow like that to try and attract food, which is like the mayflies, which live for a second, basically, get trapped. So there's hanging down from the larvae are like these little strings. It's almost like one strand of a spider web hanging down, and then the flies are attracted to the light and get caught, and then the larvae eat it. And their larvae, which is like, you know, an infant fly, for 10 months. But then they only live as a fly for 3 days. So for 10 months, they're these lights. And in this particular cave we went to on the North Island, you know, once your eyes adjusted to it, it was literally like looking at a starry night when there are no lights around. It was really cool. Anyway, so it was their version of the firefly, I guess. It was very cool. Okay, so Miriam and Layla are now friends, right? Or at least peaceful together. Okay, anybody have any questions so far before I read more? No? Are you enjoying the story? Yes. Good. All right, 35. One more sip of water here. Miriam. From that night on, Miriam and Layla did their chores together. They sat in the kitchen and rolled dough, chopped green onions, minced garlics, offered bits of cucumber to Aziza, who banged spoons nearby and played with carrots. In the yard, Aziza lay in a wicker bassinet, dressed in layers of clothing, a winter muffler wrapped snugly around her neck. Miriam and Layla kept a watchful eye on her as they did the wash, Miriam's knuckles bumping Layla's as they scrubbed shirts and trousers and diapers. Miriam slowly grew accustomed to this tentative but pleasant companionship. She was eager for the 3 cups of chai she and Layla would share in the yard, a nightly ritual now. In the mornings, Miriam found herself looking forward to the sound of Layla's cracked slippers slapping the steps as she came down for breakfast, and to the tinkle of Aziza's shrill laugh, to the sight of her 8 little teeth, the milky scent of her skin. If Layla and Aziza slept in, Miriam became anxious waiting. She washed dishes that didn't need washing. She rearranged cushions in the living room. She dusted clean windowsills. She kept herself occupied until Layla entered the kitchen, Aziza hoist on her hip. When Aziza first spotted Miriam in the morning, her eyes always sprang open and she began mewling and squirming in her mother's grip. She thrust her arms toward Miriam, demanding to be held, her tiny hands opening and closing urgently, on her face a look of both adoration and quivering anxiety. What a scene you're making, Layla would say, releasing her to crawl toward Miriam. What a scene. Calm down. Calla Miriam isn't going anywhere. There she is, your aunt. See? Go on now. As soon as she was in Miriam's arms, Aziza's thumb shot into her mouth and she buried her face in Miriam's neck. Miriam bounced her stiffly, half bewildered, half grateful smile on her lips. Miriam had never before been wanted like this. Love had never been declared to her so guilelessly, so unreservedly. Aziza made Miriam want to weep. Why have you pinned your little heart to an old, ugly hag like me? Miriam would murmur into Aziza's hair. Huh? I am nobody. Don't you see? A Donati. What have I got to give you? But Aziza only muttered contentedly and dug her face in deeper. And when she did that, Miriam swooned. Her eyes watered. Her heart took flight. And she marveled at how, after all these years of rattling loose, she had found in this little creature the first true connection in her life of false, failed connections. Early the following year, in January 1994, Dostum did switch sides. He joined Gulbuddin Hekmatyar and took up position near Balahisar, the old citadel walls that loomed over the city from the Koishar, I'm going to mutilate this, Koishar Darwaza Mountains. Together, they fired on Massoud and Rabbani forces at the Ministry of Defense and the Presidential Palace. From either side of the Kabul River, they released rounds of artillery at each other. The streets became littered with bodies, glass, and crumpled chunks of metal. There was looting, murder, and increasingly rape, which was used to intimidate civilians and reward militiamen. Miriam heard of women who were killing themselves out of fear of being raped, and of men who, in the name of honor, would kill their wives or daughters if they had been raped by the militia. It's not fair. Aziza shrieked at the thumping of mortars. To distract her, Miriam arranged grains of rice on the floor in the shape of a house, or a rooster, or a star, and let Aziza scatter them. She drew elephants for Aziza, the way Jalil had shown her, in one stroke, without ever lifting the tip of the pen. Rashid said civilians were getting killed daily by the dozens. Hospitals and stores holding medical supplies were getting shelled. Vehicles carrying emergency food supplies were being barred from entering the city, he said, raided, shot at. Miriam wondered if there was fighting like this in Herat, too, and if so, how Mullah Faizullah was coping, if he was still alive, and Bibi Joe, too, with all her sons, brides, and grandchildren, and, of course, Jalil. Was he hiding out, Miriam wondered, as she was, or had he taken his wives and children and fled the country? She hoped Jalil was somewhere safe, that he managed to get away from all of this killing. For a week, the fighting forced even Rashid to stay home. He locked the door to the yard, set booby traps, locked the front door too, and barricaded it with the couch. He paced the house, smoking, peering out the window, cleaning his gun, loading and loading it again. Twice, he fired his weapon into the street, claiming he'd seen someone trying to climb the wall. They're forcing young boys to join, he said. The Mujahideen are, in plain daylight, at gunpoint. They drag boys right off the streets. And when soldiers from a rival militia capture these boys, they torture them. I heard they electrocute them. It's what I heard, that they crush their balls with pliers. They make the boys lead them to their homes. Then they break in, kill their fathers, rape their sisters and mothers. He waved his gun over his head. Let them try to break into my home. I'll crush their balls. I'll blow their heads off. Do you know how lucky you two are to have a man who's not afraid of shaitan himself? He looked down at the ground, noticed Aziza at his feet. Get off my heels, he snapped, making a shooing motion with his gun. Stop following me, and you can stop twirling your wrists like that. I'm not picking you up. Go on before you get stepped on. Aziza flinched. She crawled back to Miriam, looking bruised and confused. In Miriam's lap, she sucked her thumb cheerlessly and watched Rashid in a sullen, pensive way. Occasionally, she looked up, Miriam imagined, with a look of wanting to be reassured. But when it came to fathers, Miriam had no assurances to give. Miriam was relieved when the fighting subsided again, mostly because they no longer had to be cooped up with Rashid, with his sour temper infecting the household, and he'd frightened her badly waving the loaded gun near Aziza. One day that winter, Layla asked to braid Miriam's hair. Miriam sat still and watched Layla's slim fingers in the mirror tighten her plaits. Layla's face scrunched in concentration. Aziza was curled up asleep on the floor. Tucked under her arm was a doll Miriam had hand-stitched for her. Miriam had stuffed it with beans, made it a dress with tie-dyed fabric, and a necklace with tiny empty thread spools through which she threaded a string. Then Aziza passed gas in her sleep. Layla began to laugh, and Miriam joined in. They laughed like this, at each other's reflection in the mirror. Their eyes tearing, and the moment was so natural, so effortless, that suddenly Miriam started telling her about Jalil and Nana and the jinn. Layla stood with her hands idle on Miriam's shoulders, eyes locked on Miriam's face in the mirror. Out the words came, like blood gushing from an artery. Miriam told her about Bibi Joe, Mullah Faizullah, the humiliating trek to Jalil's house, Nana's suicide. She told about Jalil's wives and the hurried nikah with Rashid, the trip to Kabul, her pregnancies, the endless cycles of hope and disappointment, Rashid turning on her. After Layla sat at the foot of Miriam's chair, absently, she removed a scrap of lint entangled in Aziza's hair. A silence ensued. I have something to tell you too, Layla said. Miriam did not sleep that night. She sat in bed, watched the snow falling soundlessly. I'm going to stop for a second. What do you think Layla is going to tell Miriam? Yeah, that baby is not Rashid's, right? Seasons had come and gone. Presidents in Kabul had been inaugurated and murdered. An empire had been defeated. Old wars had ended and new ones had broken out. But Miriam had hardly noticed, hardly cared. She had passed these years in a distant corner of her mind, a dry, barren field out beyond wish and lament, beyond dream and disillusionment. There, the future did not matter, and the past held only this wisdom, that love was a damaging mistake, and its accomplice, hope, a treacherous illusion. And whenever those twin poisonous flowers began to sprout in the parched land of that field, Miriam uprooted them. She uprooted them and ditched them before they took hold. Okay, that's a beautifully written paragraph because, right, it is entirely a metaphor about love and hope being a plant, right? One that she felt she needed to get rid of because all it would end up doing is hurting her, right? But somehow, over these last months, Layla and Aziza, a Harami like herself, as it turned out, had become extensions of her, and now, without them, the life Miriam had tolerated for so long suddenly seemed intolerable. Okay, so now Miriam and Aziza have something in common, right? Yeah, they were both born out of legitimate wedlock. We're leaving this spring, Aziza and I. Come with us, Miriam. The years had not been kind to Miriam, but perhaps, she thought, there were kinder years waiting still. A new life, a life in which she would find the blessings that Nana had said a Harami like her would never see. 2 new flowers had unexpectedly sprouted in her life. Who are the 2 new flowers? Yeah, Miriam and Aziza. And as Miriam watched the snow coming down, she pictured Mullah Faizullah twirling his tasbih beads, leaning in and whispering to her in his soft, tremulous voice, "But it is God who has planted them, Miriam Jo, and it is his will that you tend to them. It is his will, my girl." Okay. That ended fast. So I can get through another one. Okay, let's end there. Layla, chapter 36. Anyone feeling a little better about things now in the story? A little bit? Nice that they're getting along. All right, so notice how the settings are changing and they're giving us years pretty quickly, right? So since we started part 2, Aziza was finally born and now she's a baby. A good year has gone by. 93 went, they're in 94, right? And he's interjecting the civil war in spots, right? And what is happening in Kabul politically and the effect that it has on the residents of Kabul. So, that's all happening at the same time. And it does have an impact, obviously. What else did I want to say about this? Does anybody have any questions? No? Does everybody feel like they have a pretty good understanding of what's going on? How's the English going for everyone? Is it working reading the book along with me? Seeing the words? It's important to do that, Jeffrey, to look at the words as I'm reading them, okay? Because that's how you're going to identify what I'm saying. That's going to help your English, okay? Anybody at home have any questions or comments they want to make? You're adding
I
to the
just
next.
like where it's going.
You like where it's going? Good. You feel a
Yeah.
little better. Yeah. I didn't like it when Miriam and Layla weren't nice to each other, or at least Miriam wasn't nice to Layla. I felt badly for that. Yeah. So it's like Miriam has the family she didn't have, right? Because technically Layla could be her daughter, right? Miriam's in her 30s. Layla's 15 probably now, right? 14, 15. So probably 15 now. So she could have been her child had she been the one that she first had, right? So now she's like, she has a daughter and a granddaughter now. Yeah. Okay. Don't forget you're adding to the next vocabulary, which I think is vocabulary 9. So if you want to take a few minutes, we do have 9 minutes left of class. If you want to take a few minutes to do that, while I kind of get some things organized, looking at your vocab 8 and your quizzes. If you guys don't have questions, you're welcome to sign off in Kabul and Lucy and Cassie and Mohammed. Mohammed, where are you? Mohammed.
No.
What state are you in?
Iowa.
Iowa?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I asked Akila yesterday and she didn't know. Just a
She
different
didn't?
state. I didn't know. What do you think of Iowa? I've been to Iowa. Iowa is very flat.
Yeah, I think it's like a big city. Yeah. The weather is like freezing and
It's freezing. Are you in Des Moines?
yeah.
Des Moines, Iowa? Yeah.
Yeah, people is nice here, and
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful city, and also very large.
Yeah.
And,
It's in what we would consider the Midwest, and I think Americans from the Midwest are really nice people. You know, they're
Yeah,
very
yeah.
welcoming. Yeah, they're really nice people. Yeah. Okay, well, enjoy Des Moines. How long are you there for?
I'm not sure yet, but mm,
A little while.
maybe tonight or tomorrow.
Oh, okay, so soon.
Yeah.
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 Now that you know it's cold and you want to come home to San Diego.
Yeah, yeah. It's too cold. It's like very cold.
Well, it's cold in Kabul too, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's more cold here. It's not rainy or something, but it's cold.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
It's hard
probably
to, it's
damp.
hard to go out.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. All right. Anybody else
Yeah.
have anything they want to ask or say before we sign off? I've recorded class, so I will put that up. Okay. Nobody? Okay. I'm going to
Okay,
sign
teacher.
off.
No, teacher. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
teacher. Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye,
good night.
teacher.
Bye, teacher.
Bye.